Hello everyone and welcome to Handmade Hero, the show where we code a complete game live on stream. You know, we had a pretty depressing discussion in the pre-stream, I'm not gonna lie to you. So this is kind of gonna be like probably the most depressing programming stream that we've had here on Handmade Hero. I feel like we should all just accept that and try to wallow in it as much as possible. Today is day 219. Certainly one of the saddest numbers. 219, of course, was the I believe it was Gauss who said that it was the number that encapsulates the sadness, all of human suffering, and he was right because, of course, he's Gauss, and I don't know anything that Gauss was ever wrong about. And so if you would like to follow along with the despair and tragedy of today's stream, you should unpack day 218 source code into a directory. You should fertilize that directory with human tears, and then you should see what grows from it. And it will probably be black roses that crumble and blow away with the wind. That said, let's jump into it here. We're in the middle of the debug system, of course, a system which is meant for catching problems. So the whole point of the existence of this system is because humans are so fallible and always do everything wrong. So we're pretty much just programming right now with the expectation that everything is bad, and we need a system to prevent it from being so horrible. So let's go ahead and look at where we're at. If you remember, we did our memory management stuff yesterday, so we now can store essentially unlimited debug information as it streams in. And what happens is when we run out of memory to store it, you can basically say how much memory you want to use for that process. When we run out, it will just recycle old memory and throw away sort of information that is the oldest. And so that's pretty great in the same way that anything can really be great, which is to say that it is but a fleeting edifice that will crumble on the force of time. And eventually it will be nothing but a corroded statue face peeking up above the sands, its body destroyed and crumbling, covered beneath the desert heaves. So, like I said, that's the debug system. So what we need to do now is start to pull everything back together, you know, kind of like a sad child of a divorced family who just wants some normalcy again. We're just going to try and pull the pieces of our debug system that we had made all separately, sort of, as we were trying to figure out how we wanted it to work. Probably, you know, sort of like an awkward teenager who is unpopular at school and just is trying to figure out, you know, how to be themselves and will anyone ever love them. We're going to go ahead and try to pull those together now that we have a coherent idea of how things should be stored. So the first thing that I'd like to restore is our hierarchy. Of course, we're going to have things in a hierarchy because it's easier to access things in a hierarchy. Humans are used to accessing a hierarchy, but also because we really don't have any other choice, because humankind has evolved to keep things in a hierarchy where the majority of the people are at the bottom and are oppressed by the elements of the hierarchy that are higher up. So let's go ahead and do that. We have all of these events stored, and so what we need to do now is just build some user interface elements on top of them that will place them into this hierarchy in a rigid caste system that does not allow them any upward mobility whatsoever, unless the user, who is all-powerful, should reach in and deign it to be so and transfer them around. So what we want to do here is we want to say that the first time that we see an event, type, right? Because remember now we've got events coming in from locations in the code, and those, like very brief little beacons of light in a vast sea of darkness, need to sort of get coalesced into streams based on where they came from, right? It's kind of like it's basically like racism. We don't consider them individually in any way. We are cruel and superficial, and we just take it and we say, you came from this place, we're going to put you here, no matter what you want it to be, no matter who you are on the inside. We just plain don't care because our souls are devoid of compassion. So when we get one of those events, we are putting them into these places that we call debug elements, so that the events kind of pile up that are all coming from that one place. So what we want to do there is we want to say the first time that we create one of those elements, if that element had hierarchical information in it, we would like to organize it into the hierarchy, right? That's what we would like to do. So I'm going to go ahead and try to make that happen. We will probably fail because, like all human endeavor, it's destined for failure. Shakespeare's tragedies were the true ones. The comedies were mere fantasy that we could never hope to aspire. Sorry, to which we can never hope to aspire. So I'm going to go ahead and say that we have these trees, obviously, and we sort of had the concept that these trees have those groups and all that sort of thing in here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to say that let's make this root tree bit here. I don't know that we actually need it to be a tree. I'm going to go back to the concept of the root group there. I don't think there was any real reason we needed to stop calling it that. We can just say that there's a group and that group is there, because it's not really a tree per se. It is just a group that we build, and then if a tree wishes to view that group, it can. If it doesn't want to, it does not have to. So let's take a look at that process right here for the moment. So we have that root group, and I'm just going to create it synthetically like we were doing before. I'm going to go ahead and start re-enabling those things that can create the hierarchy. Right, and so we've got basically everything we need here. We just need to sort of rejuvenate it. We need to make it sort of conform to our new system. We need to be pro-crusties and say it doesn't really matter how these functions may have wanted to be, what they aspire to, or what their dreams are. We will place them on the bed and saw off their limbs until they fit. So here is add variable to group and create variable group, right? Create variable group is fairly straightforward. I don't see any reason why create variable group can't simply work the way that it was working before. Again, a variable group doesn't really have much in it, doesn't really have anything other than sort of a linked list. So I feel like that's just fine, right? It's just this, and that should be fine. So create variable group probably doesn't really need to be changed in any particular way. Again, these are static, stationary things, so we can go ahead and allocate them in this way, right? Now in the future, I do think, and I suppose we kind of want to start doing this as well, I do want these to kind of be free list based, so I almost want to start making these guys free list based, but I think I'm going to push that off for just a little bit. And in fact, we probably could push it off forever, to be honest, because we can just, the amount of interacting that the user's going to do with building debug states isn't really that much. You could even just leak the memory. It doesn't matter because it's the debug system. But for completeness later, we may want to actually make it properly recycle things as it goes. Just like pretty much all of the humans on planet Earth, like they don't really care about recycling till they absolutely have to, and they'd rather just have everything pile up in a landfill until the Earth is completely destroyed and barren. So let's take a look here at add variable to group. I'm just going to look at how this was working. So it looks like what we did here was we had the event stuff and that got added, and I think really the only change we have to make here is that now, instead of thinking of things as having events that get added, really what we're doing is we're adding elements. So it's really going to be like add element to group, right? And we're going to pass that element in, and the element is going to be the thing that we actually set, like so. Everything else, I think, is pretty much the same. There really isn't anything else that needs to happen there, I don't think. So that should be fine. Now, what I don't know is I'm not seeing anywhere here, and I'm assuming it's because we hadn't implemented it yet in our last pass through things, but I'm not seeing anything here that deals with how one of these groups could have children. And I think, you know, this is just kind of one of those things where it's barren. It cannot sire a child. Probably the only thing that it wanted was to be a parent, really, but it was either born infertile or its mate was, and despite what they might have wished, they will never have a family. They will just have to live out their life with that emptiness and despair. So let's take a look at what I would have to do to make that happen as well, because here's create variable group, and you can see that what it does is it creates a variable group that does not have a parent, it does not have children, right? There is no, yeah, right, it is essentially, it is both an orphan and barren. It is both of those things. So a very, very difficult life. Rather tragic, actually, if you think about it. It is sort of both the alpha and the omega in that sense. It neither has a past nor a future. It exists only for a brief moment, and then all trace of its existence is gone, and its life is meaningless. So let's see if there's something that we can do about that, because when we create a variable group, we're going to want to be able to create a variable group underneath that variable group. That's how we get a hierarchy, right? We need to have children in the variable groups in order to make that happen. So when we create a variable group, I'm thinking that maybe we would want to pass something in like, you know, do you have a parent who you were expecting to be a part of, right? Like, are you expecting to be a part of it, right? And so I'm just looking at how this would have gone. Inside debug variable group, we've got this debug variable, like that's the sentinel, right? It kind of comes through and you add these in here. And then we just look to see whether there's a group that needs to have children. So when we do add element to group, it's going to do this stuff here, as you can see. Go ahead and get that in there. It's going to go do this stuff here, but we probably also want the ability to do add group to group, right? We presumably want the ability to do add group to group like so. So we can go ahead and get all of that in here. So this would be the same thing. We'd add a link. We would insert the link, but in this time we wouldn't insert it into the, oh wait, no, we would insert it into the group Sentinel, whatever group we're going. We then would set the link up, but this time we would do the opposite of what we're doing here. We would set the children to be the children here. So this is, or I guess I should say, group. And then we would really not need to do any of that stuff. This is all meaningless. In fact, let's get rid of that as well. So that's all that is. I'm trying to think whether this is did we already vet this structure properly? The fact that there's a pointer, this is sort of like a, you know, it can either have a group or it can have a set of elements. I mean, or it can have an element. That seems reasonable. But I would point out something here that strikes me as a little bit odd, which is that if you have a debug variable group and there's a children pointer, I don't see any place you can where you get, you know, the name, right? So, you know, we've got these hierarchies now if we wanted to, but there's no way to know what it was. So I feel like this here, you know, I feel like you'd normally have some kind of a name that this group would have. And I suppose it just goes to show you how, you know, dehumanizing we really are when we just don't even care. As far as we're concerned, you just have an address. We just have a number. You're nothing but a number in a system. And we don't care about you. We don't care about your individuality. As far as we're concerned, you're just here to serve the purpose for which you were created, and there is no there's no real soul to you. We are uninterested in that. So let's take a look here. So we've got, this would be parent, I suppose. So let's take a look here. So parent sentinel. And here I think probably we would want to do parent as well, just to be clear about what's happening there. That seems reasonable to me. Go ahead and compile that. So that all compiles relatively well. And I think that's mostly everything we would need, at least to start adding things and creating groups. Now, unfortunately, like I said, we still need one more piece of the puzzle, which is that we need ways of figuring out where in the hierarchy things should go. And so we need to do that part as well, which we will do in a second. But for the moment, create variable, I think, is something that we don't ever need because we're always just going to be adding elements at the moment. So I feel like that's, and it's all code that's kind of irrelevant for what we were used to be doing as far as I can tell as well. I don't see really any part of that that needs to stay. So I'm just going to get rid of that as well. We have free variable group. That's not implemented yet, and that's fine. We can leave that there and still leave it as not implemented. Should we ever free one of these, we'll get that and we'll go do it. And I think this is both not relevant anymore. And so really the only thing that we need to deal with now is this. And it's still actually the sort of the correct thing to do, this correct call. We just never implemented it, right? Because we were sort of busy with other things. So that's really the part that we'll have to do to finally make things work. Let me double check here what we were doing by just sort of doing the same thing we were doing before and having a temporary sort of a thing like that. And then we'll focus on implementing this guy. It won't be particularly hard. It just will be a bit of typing. Okay. So that's what we've got so far. And so what I want to do now is I just want to actually start calling these guys in the appropriate places. So, we've got, when we create our debug state at the beginning, right, we've got our sort of initialized, oops, that's spelled wrong. And so in here, when we initialize everything, we're going to want to do, you know what, this is interesting. Do we still want any of this stuff? I don't know if we still want any of this stuff, but at the outset, obviously, we're going to want to do something where we take that root group and we actually create a variable group there, right? And if I go into create variable group and I look at it, pretty much all I need to do is pass that debug state and that'll go. So now I've got a root group and that's ready to go. So now I should be able to wire this up and I should be able to add things hierarchically into this group and be good to go, right? So let's take a look at collate debug records. And if we look at store event, I think that's where all the magic would happen. When we go to store an event, sorry, not store event. It's actually get element from event right here. When we go to get an element from event, you can see that when we get to a time when we see an event for the first time that comes from something we didn't understand, you can see us kind of getting it here where we're like, oh, right, we didn't know where this was from. We need to create one and put it in the hash table. That's the time when we now want to do the hierarchical lookup. Now, the thing that I don't really know here is we sort of introduced a system that was based on underscores for finding these. Not all of our stuff necessarily follows that at the moment, and we kind of have that block name thing. So what I'm going to do for now is I'm just going to say, let's just treat everything the same way, and we'll see what happens, and then we'll kind of go through and think about it a little bit more as we start to integrate the other parts in. So what happens here is we're in a situation where we received an event. We know that our code has this block name thing. And we know, at least at the moment, that block name was what we want to use to file it. Now, we might remove it, in which case we'll just always use GUID to do our filing, but then we would also have to think about how we want to do GUIDs to actually create the hierarchy. So we definitely have some thinking to do. And I think there's probably some stuff we need to do that, to fix a few things that probably want to be fixed as we get this going. And specifically, that would be that while our debug value, what do we call them? While our debug variables all have those little names that we gave them, like, you know, ground chunks underscore checkerboard or whatever. While those make sense, the other things, like where we were dumping debug data, we probably want that all to use the same unified concept, but it won't be. And just, you know, again, so you know kind of what I'm thinking about, and we're on the same page, you're not like, huh, what's he saying? You remember we have like this stuff here where we can say like begin data block, and you can see this thing, and then we sort of push out all these values, right? So what I'm saying is that these values are all coming from locations in the code that are bracketed by this data block thing. We probably want them filed under a data block that's created in this thing, right? That's probably how we would want them to go UI-wise. And so we're probably going to have to, once we get this working, do a little bit more in terms of just like thinking about how we want to produce the hierarchical structure of these things in order to make it do what we actually want it to do. So I'm just going to start by doing the basic version, but I think we're going to want to level it up a little bit to get the really good, sweet action. I don't know why we would be getting sweet action on a day that's all about depression and failure. But sometimes there is a brief, you know, a slight ray of sunshine peeks through the clouds before being squashed and choked by the swirling darkness. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. When I go here and find a result for the first time, one that's not there anymore, what I want to do is I want to use that get hierarchical, you know, get whatever that was, get group for hierarchical name. That's what I want to do. So I want to place this guy in the hierarchy. So what I want to do is say, all right, so I want to find its parent group. And I'm going to do that by passing that name in, which is the block name. That's going to give me the group that I feel like this guy should be to which this guy should be added. Sorry, trying a little bit of a tongue twister there. And so then all I'm going to do at that point is I'm just going to add it, right? I'm just going to say, all right, I've got the element. So now I'm going to add that element in like so. And I guess I don't actually need to store this link for any particular reason. I'm going to add that in to where the parent group is, and that's it, right? And that's really all I wanted to do. Oops, that's not a result. I wanted event. That's really all I wanted to do, right? And I'm going to go ahead and, again, force the drawing of this thing, which I believe, oops, like we were doing before, so we can see what we're creating as we create it. So we can start to get our little hierarchical placement thing working properly. Of course, I don't remember where any of that code is, but you know, sometimes you just don't remember where any of the code is. No big deal. So let's take a look. I believe it's, here we go. It's right in here. So when we're doing this tree group here, again, what I can do is just do the same thing that I was doing before, where I could just say, like, you know what? Do we ever create a tree? Can't we just create a tree down here and make that tree always point to our root group? That seems like the easiest way to get started, so it doesn't have to be hacky. We kept hacking it in there, but there's really no need for that. Where is the tree? Yeah, here we go. Perfect. So now I believe, oh, that was not what I was expecting. It looks like there's things in our hierarchy that we don't know how to draw, which I suppose is understandable because now we're adding just about everything in there. But we want to be able to handle that, so we should probably go ahead and make sure this is. And we started a whole half hour late today, so this 5-minute warning is completely meaningless. Just like existence. So let's see. Here we have debug event to text. We're passing this event. I don't want locals, I want my watch window. So let's take a look at what the event actually is. Here it is. We've got a type of 6. So let's take a look at what that event type means. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's just a marked debug value. And so we can easily, again, make our system handle that. And we probably just should. There's no sense in not doing it. So here where we have debug event to text, which I believe is where we were flailing before, I'm just going to go ahead and make this print that out anyway. And in fact, I feel like what we could do as well is just do something like this, where we actually just do, you know, that, which I feel like is totally reasonable. And what we would pass there is just that block name. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just going to let that go for now, and we'll see what we get. So let's continue on here. I don't actually know. I'm kind of surprised that all that stuff worked just without us actually doing anything. That's kind of amusing. You know, sometimes even in the depths of despair, some little tiny thing goes your way, and the important thing to remember is not to let that go to your head. Things are still absolutely as bad as you thought they were, and a minor victory is no reason to change your highly pessimistic outlook on the inevitability of human suffering. So let's take a look here at what we've actually got. One thing that's a little bit strange to me is I realize I'm not actually seeing any of our debug variables, and I don't know why I'm not seeing any of our debug variables. I would have expected to see some of our debug variables, but I guess I am not internalizing correctly how those things flow through the system, because I'm seeing all of our debug data showing up, but not our debug variables, which is a little bit odd, right? Now that maybe because we don't print them out, like I don't know if we skip them intentionally or something like this. That's certainly possible, but I want to be able to see them. So I want to go ahead and see why we're not getting those first before I do anything else. So here's debug event to text. Well, here's debug dropping menu. So here we go when we switch on the IDs. It looks like it tries to print out just about everything besides the bitmap ID and the counter thread list. So in theory, I think that anything that was there should presumably be handled through the system. So I feel like that means that we must not be adding them at all, if that makes sense. And I'm not sure why we wouldn't be adding them, because it feels like pretty much everything should be added, right? When we do collate debug records, pretty much everything that's in the debug stream I feel like should be getting processed right here, right? And so it seems to me that all of those debug values should also be happening that way. Now let's take a look. Yeah, so I feel, I don't know why that wouldn't be happening. So there's begin block, end block, open data block, close data block. I don't know why we wouldn't be getting that. So I think I might want to take a look at that, because event type mark debug value, that is, and we even know that that was coming through because we even had a request to print one out, right? In fact, that's this one. Is it not? So we know that at least one debug value is getting hit. But for some reason it has no block name. So things are a little wonky, right? Things are a little bit strange. So I'm going to take a look at what's coming through mark debug value. I think that's what I want to do. You know, I mean, again, like what I want to do is just cry. I want to just weep openly I want to break down in tiers. I want to just give up and let the horrors of the world continue unabated. But instead, what I'm going to do is set a breakpoint on mark debug value. So let's take a look at which ones we're getting here. We're getting, so the block name is set to 0. So I guess I must just not set the block names for some reason. But we're getting code handmade debug interface.h 293. So that's a bummer, right? I think, because that's not what we actually would probably want to have happen. And so I think I know, I think I can see exactly what's going on here, and that's a bummer. So what's happening is, because we call debug initialize value here, everything is going to come from the same location in the code. It's going to come right here. So I think what that implies is that we would somehow have to make everything happen in a macro there, or at the very least, we have to have, we have to have this part right here. We would have to have it generate a different GUID. Now, what we could do is use the name for the GUID. Right, that would work. This would presumably work. Oops. At least that's my assertion. I don't actually know, but that's my assertion. And hey, it does. And you can kind of see that happening there. But what that also means is that we probably want to store the block name in this event as well. There we go. Wait a minute, but I just did event GUID equals GUID. What is the GUID that's getting passed there? Oh, so that was just a straight up, that was just, we had already thought of that and we just kind of failed. So all right, that's actually not so bad. So here is a slightly more reasonable version of this, although I'm not sure I also see exactly why this is looking the way it is, but at least we're getting more of the variables that we thought we were going to get. Now, like I said, the unhandled thing there, what's going on there? I want to see what is happening. Why are we getting stuff before the unhandled, right? You can kind of see here that we're getting a bunch of information before the unhandled. And I guess that's because we're actually printing out, we must be doing the add name here where we're printing out whatever the name is of this guy, right? The event block name we're printing out here. So I guess that's why we're seeing two of them. But anyway, we can deal with that a little bit later. So this actually now, when we look at it, you can kind of see that we now at least know that we're getting the data that we expect to be getting. Here's all our debug variables. And so now what we want to do is organize these into a hierarchy, right? In order to do this, what we want to do, again, is like dissect that name that comes in and use the underscore to tell us how the hierarchy should be self-assembling, right? That was what we decided to do. For those of you who don't remember, what we decided was, because we want these things to sort of work and compile out and do those sorts of things, we had stuff like debug if simulation use space outlines. We just built the hierarchy into the name. So underscore is essentially like a slash almost that like says that, simulation is the group it's under and use space outlines is the, is the actual value. That's what that is, right? So now we just need some way of actually parsing that and, doing the right thing. In order to do that, we can just go to our get group for hierarchical name. Instead of always returning the root group, we now just need to actually look at the name and return a group that is actually correct, right? So let's do that. The first thing we want to do is we want to take a look at this name, and we want to, I think, scan the name for that underscore, right? So we probably want to do something like first underscore equals 0, and then we want to do something like char star scan equals name. Scan is valid plus plus scan. So just run through the string like so. And then I think what we want to do is say, all right, excuse me, if the value is the underscore, I'm going to set first underscore to scan, and then I'm going to break, right? So we're just running through the string and finding the first underscore that we see there. And once we have that first underscore, we sort of know, we sort of have a bracketed region that is the substring, if you will, that's the first sort of hierarchical group under which we should place this guy. So what we want to do here is say, well, if first underscore actually was valid, then we know there is a hierarchicalness to this thing. If it's not, then there's no more hierarchy to do. So we would just want to insert the thing into whatever its parent was. So I think we want to do something like this. And so we would want to say, like, okay, debug variable group result just equals whatever the parent is that's being passed in, right? And then what we'd want to do is say, if there is a first underscore, we keep going. Otherwise, we just return the result. Because if we didn't find an underscore, we don't need to do any more work hierarchically. If we found that underscore, then what we want to do is say, okay, we now need to see whether or not a group already exists for, underneath this parent that I can file this guy in. And if it doesn't, I need to create one. So I need to do something like get or create group with name or something like this, right? And that's just going to be, okay, I know it's going to be first underscore minus name. That's how long the group name is. I know it's under this parent, and I know it starts here. So I'm just passing them the substring and saying, I need you to give me that group, right? That you found. When I get that group, this is like the subgroup that we should be filed under. Then I'm just going to say, like, okay, the result, I can just call myself again, right? I can recurse down here and say, like, you know what? Now let's just take the next part of the name. So first underscore plus 1. Take that next part of the name and keep going, right? Just keep going. And that should do everything I need it to do. So as long as I can do this operation, oops. As long as I can do this operation somehow, I should be fine. The only kicker is that I don't have a null terminated name anymore. I have a name that has a particular length to it, right? Which is generally how I prefer to do strings anyway, but it's not how we generally do strings on Handmade Hero because we don't really do that much with strings. So it's not that big a deal. But anyway, what we want to do here is we just want to search through the parent to see whether or not we can find something that has the same name. So all I need to do here is I just need to loop through that sort of list. And remember, get group for hierarchical name is not a performance critical function in any way. So we don't really have to worry too much about this. It only happens sort of when debug things are first coming in. And then once the hierarchy is set up, it never does this anymore because it only actually activates when it sees a new debug location come through that it's never seen before. That's the only time this stuff even gets called. So even in the context of the debug system, it's not even performance critical. Never mind the fact that the whole thing is also in the debug system. So it super doesn't matter at all, which is kind of nice because it means we don't have to do anything fancy or be too concerned about what happens here. So what we want to do is we want to loop over these debug links, right? And that's going to go by taking whatever that parent is. We're going to, excuse me, we've got a parent group. we want to take the sentinel and we want to look at its next pointer, right? We're going to go until we hit the sentinel again, and we're just going to chain. So all we want to do is say if the name matches on these guys, then we've found it, and we're good. Right? Pretty straightforward there. Otherwise, we have to create a new one. So we don't really know what this quite is yet. We'll deal with that in 1 second. But again, we do know what happens here. If we don't have one of these, then we just need to create one. Right? So we need to create a hierarchical group here. And then we also want to add group to group. Right? So again, pretty straightforward there. But the problem is we don't have any way of doing this. And you'll notice I sort of foretold this, like a grim prophecy where the world ends and everyone dies. I said this day would come. And like all prophecies that foretell the end times, of course, it comes true right on schedule. And debug variable group does not currently have a name. It needs one because without a name, we can never create a hierarchy, and we wouldn't even display one if we did have it, right? We just have a bunch of pluses that we expand that don't actually have names. That's hardly very useful. So I think we want to say here that we're going to do that. So now that we have a way of storing those names in there and using them, so what I'd like to do is say that when we call create variable group, we pass the name length and the name, and it stores it. And then that way we can now also do a string compare to see whether the names match and other things of this nature. So the first thing we want to do is say, is the link a group thing? And if it is, does it match? So we would want to say length strings are equal or something like this. And we would want to pass, okay, link children name length, link children name, and name length name, like so. That's pretty much all we would need to do there. We would need to do uncreate variable group. We would want to do something like this, where we just have name length and name. And so when we initialize one of these, we give it a name. And off you go. So strings are equal. We haven't written yet. Create variable group. Identifier not found. That's probably because we need this to be in a slightly different place. So we need all these guys. These guys need to move up here, like so. And this is a U32. Trust me, my strings will never be more than 4 million characters long. If they are more than 4 million characters long, I think we would have a hard time displaying them on the screen, I can tell you that. So let's see, get group for hierarchical. Okay, so the first time we call get group for hierarchical name, obviously it's a recursive function now, so we need to start it off with the root group so it knows that it's kind of at the base of the hierarchy, so that's easy enough. And then of course this one, well, you know what, I could call it root if I wanted to. That's about it. Okay. So I think all we need to do now is implement a strings are equal. I don't remember where strings are equal was. We wrote one for just the regular string compare, but I don't remember where we put it. Okay, we put it right here. So what I need to do is I need to make a string compare that uses lengths instead of null termination. And so that's just like this sort of a thing, right? And just, we could even make it so that this can compare strings that happen to be as long as can fit in memory. There's not a particular reason not to do it, so we easily could do it. We might as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say that the result is probably going to be equal to, well, I guess a equals b is a reasonable enough thing to set it. I'm not sure why we did it that way originally, but I think what I actually want to do is say if a length equals b length, then we know that we actually, have something to work with here. Otherwise, the result is false. So I think probably that's what I would start with. I'd say the lengths have to be equal. So if that is true, then we can continue, right? So assuming those lengths are equal, we can do something like this. Okay. Where we say, all right, index equals 0, index is less than a length, and we know that the lengths are equal if we're in this at all, right? I mean, I'm basically just saying, hey, if the lengths aren't equal, then obviously the strings aren't equal because they're different lengths, so duh, right? Then I'm saying, all right, loop over the a length, because since they're equal now, a length or b length are the same value. We don't have to care. So we loop over both of them, right? And I guess what I would say is here we would just go result assume true, and if anything doesn't match, we set to false and break, right? So what I do here is say if a index is not equal to b index, then we're done. Okay, so that's roughly where we're at. Now, this is not quite going to work for us at the moment, if I am correct, because when we debug draw main menu, we don't actually have any way at the moment of drawing like the actual group headers, right? I mean, we didn't really do that. And this code is kind of all weird and wonky, but so you can see we're kind of coming through here. We're looping over things, and we say like, okay, when we get to one of these things, we say debug variable link, here's the link. We say debug get event from link, but it might have been a group, right? It might have been a group. So you can see that it's doing a if link children kind of a thing here, right? So if event is not a particularly that's I don't really know what we want to do about that, because we want sort of the ability to do either or, right? So I think probably what we want to do is say something more like up front. We want to say like, if the link has children, then we're going to process it in a hierarchical way, right? And I think since both of these we could use the link like so, I think we could just do this. Well, I guess we could always just, meh. Make sense? Right? So if we are going to do the one, if it's a group, we handle it, and if it's not a group, we don't, kind of a thing. We do the other path. So if I want to do that, I'm trying to think about what I would need to do here. I think I can just go ahead and do basically this exact same path for now, just to get us into a place where we can do stuff. So let me just do that effectively, right? We don't want to do debug event to text. In fact, when we do debug text out, it would be nice if debug text out, let me just see how debug text out worked. I'm interested to know. It would have been nice if we had made it so that we could have passed in length strings, right? It would have been nice if we could just pass the length of a string and have that do it, because when it actually outputs text, there's no reason this couldn't be an index loop here as well, right? So that's a little bit unfortunate, to say the least, but that's okay. I'll get over it. This can be crappy for now, since we're kind of in the middle of other things. I don't really mind. So I'll just say, all right, link children name length / less than right count text, which it's always going to be, but just want to make sure that we're sort of asserting on our crappy code. And then what I want to do is I want to just kind of copy into that text buffer. So I'm gonna literally just do this, where I take the name length and I copy into that text buffer whatever the name was. And I should probably say +1 because I need space for the null terminator as well. And that does this whole situation. And I don't actually know. I feel like we had code for doing groups before, but I don't really remember what we ended up doing with it. So I'm not sure. So for the moment, like, where's the thing? I guess, like, where's the thing that tracks the depth? I guess the depth is here. So I guess that's fine. I don't know, though. We may have to go remember how this code worked so that we can actually restore our processing of it. Yeah. And I guess that, at the moment, can be gone. So item color, I don't really know what that was doing before. Oh, it's an is hot sort of a thing. Okay. So that's all good. I'm actually going to do it this way. Yeah, I feel like we had this code before, but we must have kind of gotten rid of it at some point. All right, so actually, amusingly, that worked the first time, which this is supposed to be a stream about deep depression, and so I'm not really sure how to take that, other than to be extremely depressed about the fact that it worked the first time. But you can kind of see now we've got our hierarchy simulation, and put simulation under there. We have AI familiar. It did 2 levels there, just like it should have done. Render a camera, do the same thing. So that totally self-assembled exactly the way that we would have wanted it to. So that's actually exactly what we wanted. So yeah, okay. So we now just want to kind of go in there, presumably, and actually do something where we will allow you to expand and collapse them, which we already had. So we're just restoring our old code that we had working for that matter, right? That's really all we need to do to get that happening. So I'll go ahead and do that. How much time do we have left on the stream? Only about 7 minutes, but that might be enough time to make that happen. We'll see. Okay. So yeah, again, I think that this code could be stand to be cleaned up a little bit. That's certainly true, but we can do that next week. That's all good. And let's see here. So what the problem is that we eliminated the place where group expansion and collapsing is stored, I believe. Oh no, we didn't. We still have it in debug view. That's where that is. So really all we have to do is reinstate that code. Where I don't actually know if we accidentally deleted it all or what happened to it. Here we go. So here, it's got the expand stuff happening there. So yeah, we're pretty close, it looks like. And here is, yeah, so I think really all we need to do is this and say, you know, the iteration is going to be based on the view, right? And we will do that push if necessary, right? This code is too janky. The way that this iterates over things, I don't really like, to be completely honest with you. And yeah, because like it's got link here, it processes link. It then does iterlink equals iterlink. Yeah, I don't like the way we wrote this stack thing. I feel like it's too obtuse. It'd be nice to make this more straightforward and cleaner, in a way that was more legible and less likely to be messed up. But anyway, so we've got the expanded always thing, or whatever this is happening here. We now are checking on that. So what we need to do is just get that view. So we need to do it like this, right? Where we can just say like, okay, grab the view for this thing, and I think that's all we really need, right? And so once we know that, we can also create an interaction for it, which I guess, I'm not sure what default interaction did originally, but what we want to do here is we want to create an interaction that's going to allow things to expand and collapse, right? So we just want an interaction for this guy that would do like toggle collapse or whatever. Do we have one of those? I feel like we must have, because at one point it was working. Debug interaction, and I just saw the code for it as well. Nop, toggle value, drag value, tear value, resize, select. But I just saw there just was an expand always, right? I mean, it's right there. So it was toggle value, I guess is what we called it. Some kind of generic thing. Yeah. Yeah, typical. It's typically generic. You know, it's just like the way life wants everything to sort of be slotted into some homogeneous, selfless, like sort of, I don't mean selfless, but sort of just the unbearable sameness of it all, you know. So let's take a look and see what that does here. Who is calling? Oh, varlink interaction. This is not actually a varlink. It is something else, but of course I don't know if we have an interaction that's for groups. We may have to create one, right? Because a varlink interaction, let's see, get event from link and debug, right? So if it's calling debug variable link, although what it should do is just, I feel like it should sort of detect that, right? Because it can. So item interaction event, I feel like, yeah. I feel like that's not, I feel like it should be able to detect that. So I want to look and see how that interaction stuff worked in toggle value, right? So here's toggle value. When we create this guy, we take a look at what the event is. If it's an open data block, we did this, right? So that suggests that all those open data blocks were going to be things that were being expanded and collapsed, but that's not really what we want, right? That's not what we want at all. We want there to be a way to, yeah, so this is really what we want. We want debug interaction, you know, expand or toggle expansion. And I don't think we want this at all. Right? We want that. If that makes sense? I think that's what we want. And so since that's the case, it really only needs this sort of a thing here. So really what we could do, instead of a varlink interaction, we can just do this sort of stuff directly, right? We can just call this directly. So instead of a varlink interaction, it's really just a regular interaction. Debug ID interaction like so. And we've got the link that's made from the tree there. There we go. We need to name this guy so that we can have him. And then we also need to actually pass that. So toggle expansion, like so. So let's see how that looks. I don't know why those are all highlighting. But now we're working properly, so that's all good. And so why is the item color, item interaction, tree link, why is that item interaction always considered hot? That's a little bit strange. Because this should be specific to the tree link here, right? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. But it's a different link every time. Where is that guy? Debug ID from link. Where is debug ID from link? I don't actually know. Debug ID from link. And I think that does mean we're out of time as well. But I'm going to take a little longer. Let's see. That looks correct. So I'm not sure. I am not sure why it thinks that we are in. Why it thinks they're all hot there. That's a bit. It's a bit obtuse to me, and I'm not sure why. Everything else worked just fine. So I'd like to know what it, and in fact you can see we should probably do like debug ID like this, because this is the same thing. Right. So I don't really know. I don't know why that's doing that. That is a bit surprising to me. And so all I really know is that for whatever reason, the interaction is always coming back as hot. And that should be checking, I would think, to see whether or not the hot interaction and our interaction are the same. And I guess it's checking type and generic. What are the type and generic? But it's not actually checking the ID. Did we do that on purpose? Why does it not check the ID? Shouldn't this also say debug IDs are equal? That just seems like probably, I mean, debug IDs are equal. I feel like that must have just been an oversight because we've gone through so many iterations of the code that we just didn't quite do that, because that makes no sense, right? Like, the interaction has an ID on it. Those IDs have to be equal in order for it to be the same interaction. So it shouldn't ever be considered hot unless that was true, right? In other words, this should have to be like that, I would assume. And big surprise, now it works. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the Q&A because I think that's all good now. I'm pretty happy with where that's at. Yeah. All right. We're getting pretty close on this debug stuff. I'm feeling pretty good about it. I mean what I mean. I'm very depressed about it, and it's awful. And everyone should give up now. And with that, I'm going to go to the pre-stream. D7 Samurai, was this the depression-oriented programming approach I keep hearing about? Yes. Very important. You need to read the book Depression-Oriented Programming or something. M1EL, you pass string length together with pointer to string data in several places. Do you think it would be better to create a string struct that holds length and a data point? You know, it hasn't really been something that I've felt like we were that was cumbersome currently. So no, but I do that sometimes. It just hasn't gotten to the point where I really thought that that was necessary. So while I wouldn't say don't do that, I also, in this case, don't really feel like it's super necessary to do. If that makes sense. Fitster88, you've talked a lot about languages lately. Have you taken a look at Swift at all? Thoughts? I have not taken a look at Swift at all, but I thought Swift was like an interpreted language or something. In which case, I doubly don't want anything to do with it. Elvin, how do you come up with that literacy stuff? That was awesome. Literacy? You mean like being able to read? I'm not sure I understand what you mean by literacy stuff, but I'm happy to tell you how I came up with it if you tell me what that meant. Program gamer. I don't get anything. Okay. Well, that is a problem, but don't despair. You could go back to the beginning of Handmade Hero and start there, perhaps. Yunfan. Do you think that the bug in debug interactions are equal would have been caught by a compiler-generated comparison operator as in C++? First of all, I didn't know that C++ generated comparison operators. When did they add that? Because it didn't used to. What are you talking about? Did they add a feature recently where you can tell it to automatically generate one? Or what? Because didn't used to be a feature. As for whether it was something that would have helped us, no, because it probably can't generate automatic code for the union, so we probably couldn't have used it. It would be too dumb. Graga, will Handmade Hero 2 be written in JAI? I don't know that I'm going to make a Handmade Hero 2, but... Elvin, I meant literature talk, sorry. Oh, yeah, I don't know, that's just like... I am good at making up parody-sounding literary phrases, so I can kind of do them while I'm doing something else. It's not too bad. I mean, they're not great, obviously, but they can be good enough. I feel like part of that's just like, it's just mimicry, right? It's like if you hear enough of those silly kind of things, you can generate them. It's sort of like doing an impersonation of a celebrity, right? You're impersonating a philosophy student. The Geek Pirate. Who is your favorite figure in the computing world, dead or alive? Mine's Claude Shannon. It's not a bad one. I don't know. I like Gauss, but he's not really computing. He's more math. How about Handmade Browser in JAI? I think if you were gonna start with that, you just rewrite the web like the actual like substrate. I wouldn't implement a browser because the not even half, 90% of the problem with the web browsers is not the browser, it's the spec. Luigi, off topic, but how old were you when you started coding? I was 7. A pulsing mage, do you think that Intel hitting the process size limit will make video game falter, or will they survive? I think they'll survive just fine. To be honest, I don't think the video game industry is really predicated on hardware improvements these days. I mean, I think that's almost self-evident by the fact that like a lot of the biggest franchises aren't even very good looking. Like, I mean, if you look at the latest Call of Duty, it doesn't even look very good. Like, it actually looks kind of old tech-wise. And then nobody seems to care. Casey, you are as old as me. Are you also planning to retire from working as soon as possible? No, I like working. And in fact, I don't know really what I'd do with myself if I stopped working. What I really want is not to stop working. What I want is to have a better environment in which to work. I want to have like an environment where the rest of the people who work on computing actually care about it being good and sane. Like, I want to live in a world where nobody would ever say something like, I think the answer to this problem is to take a high-level language and compile it to a lower-level language and then compile that to JavaScript, which we've set up as a template in a specific way so that the browser can read it and know that it was generated by that process, and then compile that into native code and then run it. I want to live in a world where that's just obviously, you know that you need to just stop, erase everything on everyone's hard drive at your company, and start over. Instead of going like, I think that's a good idea, let's go forward. What do you think about test-driven development? I've answered that question so many times, I'm gonna have to skip it, sorry, but we've answered that like many, many, many times. Do you actually play games yourself? If so, what? Yes, I haven't had much time to lately, but you can actually watch. In fact, if you go to my Twitch channel, my personal Twitch channel, See Muratori, you can even see like old recordings. I think on there, there's of me like playing some games and stuff. Why should I keep on going in this harsh, cold reality when I get lost on episode 005 of Handmade Hero? Why indeed? Right? And you know, because existence is meaningless and we are separate points in a void that can never feel any connection, you know, and never sort of like transcend our human limits of sort of our earthly trappings. Why indeed? Why even watch Handmade Hero at all? And the answer, I think, is that we just have to have faith that the variable is looking down on us from the great memory, and that if we all just like work hard and try to be good people, that eventually the variable will let us into the great memory. And we will live in peace and happiness with all of our other discretized values. Active binary, would you prefer to UI in C code or use something like HTML or something else? I always prefer C code, or rather more specifically metaprogrammed C code, but definitely not HTML. Ingeniero, if you could be given complete control over Microsoft or Apple, which one would you choose and what would be your #1 priority? If I was given complete control over either of them, I wouldn't care which one you gave me. And my first priority would be restoring the old concept that an operating system is an open platform for running code, and its primary goal is to make a stable environment for people to run programs on. That's what I would do. Which, by the way, neither of those companies ever does or cares about in any way, as far as I can tell. Brett Hudson, mind giving a shout out about your appearance on the Indie Radio podcast tomorrow? Sure. You know what, I'll be honest with you. I don't really know much about the Indie Radio podcast. They asked me if I wanted to be on the show, and I said yes, because I like both the concept of podcasts and the concept of indie-ness. I went and listened to the podcast as well, and it seemed like a cool podcast, but I know nothing other than the fact that I will be on it. And it was like, I don't know how you search for it, but it was like, it kind of looked like that. Like it had parentheses around it. So yes, I know nothing about it. I know absolutely nothing. I do not know who Brett Hudson is, for example. I am like the most ignorant person about any of this. But you can go to this site, indiefunction.com, and find out more about it. That's how I found out more about it. It's also very pretty. Like it's a nicely designed site. But this radio button here, I know this is where I went. That's all I know. So I listened to some of the backups. I don't know how you listen to it live. It looks like there's just some kind of flash thing here, maybe. So tomorrow you could come here. I believe it's at 12 p.m. If I'm not, it's at noon, I think. But I don't know when the live one happens. I assume it happens then. Like I said, I know literally nothing about it other than I said I'd love to be on the show, and I will be on the show. That is all I know. I'm as in the dark as anyone else. So maybe Brett Hudson can tell you more about it. But I'll be posting a link on my Twitter to it after it's done anyway, so you can listen to it after the fact. So, because that I will know for sure. Mitch77X, Casey, the question was not entirely meant to be funny. Can you imagine to still code games and stuff when you were like 60? Yeah, I mean, I would like to continue working on technology projects until I'm 60. The question will not be whether I want to. The question will be whether or not I'm good enough to, because at some point your brain is just too old to do anything useful. But, you know, maybe if I do enough good stuff while I'm still capable of it, you know, someone will let me be sort of like just a random, you know, old sort of good luck charm at their game company or something, and that would be fine with me too. Like, they wouldn't even have to pay me, right? Because hopefully if I'm retired, I have enough money by then to like live or whatever. I'd be happy to just kind of like go in and like participate a little bit or whatever, you know. Elvin, sometimes I compare myself with other great programmers who get depressed because I'm far away from their level. I know I shouldn't be comparing because they grew up in different environments, and I know for sure I can reach their level if I apply myself and learn quick, but sometimes it just gets to me and I feel bad about it. Have you ever felt that way? Any tips on how to overcome it? I guess I don't know if I've ever felt that way. I don't think so. I don't think I've ever felt that way. I guess what I would say is there's obviously any particular thing, some of it is nature and some of it's nurture, right? And you got whatever genetics you got in terms of your ability to understand code and to be a good coder and whatever. Like, if whatever was up there is up there, right? And so that part's fixed and you can't change it. So the part that you can affect is how hard you work at it, right? And so I would say that the majority of the, of what you want to do is just make sure that you program a lot every day. And if you do that, you know that you will at least reach your own potential, right? And I don't really know what to say about it other than that. There's no sense in getting depressed about it either way. I know this was the depression stream, so I should be saying something like in character and depressing, but in actuality, I don't want to say anything depressing about that, because I feel like really what you want to do is approach it in that way. You want to basically go like, look, I got whatever I got in terms of natural talent for this, and the rest of what determines how much interesting stuff I'll do in my programming career is just how hard I work at it. Because comparing yourself on an absolute scale to someone else, like someone else may have been born with a better programming brain than you, right? That's just the truth. It could be possible, right? But who cares? It doesn't matter. There's not some ranking of programmers that's like, there's no Olympics for programming. And even if there were, it wouldn't matter, right? Your ranking among where you are in programming is not really relevant. What you were able to accomplish in your career is what's relevant. And on a more personal level, whether you enjoy it is what's relevant, right? Those are the two things, you know, whether you get satisfaction out of it and whether or not you accomplish something interesting, that's what actually matters. And the chances that you're not smart enough to do programming that matters is pretty low. I think, if you're able to follow anything on Handmade Hero, you're probably at a point, and I've seen you ask a lot of questions. You're obviously thinking about this stuff a lot. So I feel like the chances that you don't have enough gray matter in there to make it work is low. And so what's much more likely is not working hard enough at it and not doing enough to try and, not writing enough code. And so then you never actually, do much. And it's worth noting that most programmers will never really do anything particularly interesting, right? Because they just don't work that hard. They'll go in and read Facebook all day, and they're like, twiddled some PHP code and imported some library so that Facebook's GIF resizer could resize an animated cat or something, right? A lot of people just aren't picking interesting projects. They're not dedicating themselves to them. They're spending a lot of time at the ping pong table or whatever else, right? And so just being diligent and picking interesting projects to try and actually, applying yourself to try and solve an interesting problem is already putting yourself ahead of most of the people who call themselves programmers. Most of the people who call themselves programmers are just trying to figure out how to get a high-paying web job or something, they just want to do that. And so, you don't have to be even the world's smartest programmer in the world. You just have to apply yourself, and I think you're in good shape there. That's what I think anyway. But I don't know. I have no idea. I can't tell you that it took me a long time to be a good programmer, for whatever that means. For me to consider myself a good programmer, when I started programming when I was 7, I didn't know what was going on, and I had to call my dad in when I had bugs because I didn't know how to fix them, and it takes a long time. So the other thing I guess I would say is don't be discouraged if you've only been programming for a few years and you're not great at it yet. Well, neither was anybody else. I don't know anybody who just sat down and 6 months in was a great programmer. I don't think that's possible. I think programming is very much a linguistic kind of endeavor, and much like there's nobody who picked up and speaks fluent Japanese within 6 months, you don't speak fluent C in 6 months. It's a long process, and when you're talking about getting to the level of fluency to create something, you're talking about learning a language and then writing a novel, right? And if you were to think about how long it would take you to pick up a language you don't know and then write a great book in that language, it's a fantastic number of years, right? That's just a long time. And so I think you should make sure you don't have unrealistic expectations about your ability to program and for how long you've spent on it and so on. So. Gasto5, do you think Japanese not adopting the OOP paradigm is because they are smarter or simply because of not being interested in changing to new languages? I'm sorry, I was unaware that the Japanese didn't adopt OOP. I have no idea. I literally have no idea about that. I both have never heard of it and don't know that I could say anything interesting about it even if I had. JP2 pseudocoder question: how would one go about learning assembly language, and are compilers linkers written in that? So pretty much assembly language is not really something that a lot of people program in anymore these days in terms of the whole code. In the old days, when I was a kid, certainly, if you're talking about the Commodore 64, let's say, or the Apple II, it was very common for someone to write a whole thing in assembly language. That wouldn't have been a shock. If you were I wrote this Commodore 64 game in assembly language, no one would be oh my god, what? That's weird. Nowadays, if you said, I wrote this whole game in assembly language, people would be what are you talking about? Nobody does that. So, assembly language nowadays is more something that's done in small chunks for only the most important part of your code. And so, yeah, compilers and linkers, no, they're almost never written in assembly language. Typically, what happens is you take an existing compiler, an existing operating system, and an existing compiler, you write the new operating system, new compiler, whatever it is, on that system, and you're cross-compiling, right? Or building a compiler with another compiler until it gets to the point where it can self-host. So, if you're interested in learning assembly language, I've said this before, use the debugger. The best way to learn assembly language is to look at what the debugger generates, because then you can just say, okay, I put some code in here, go to disassembly, and now you can see what it did, right? So that's the easiest way to learn it, I think, in addition to obviously like reading people's tutorials online, which will be, a way to get you started. But to just see what happens, anything that you could write in C, you can immediately see in the debugger what it generated for assembly. So it's pretty easy for you to go, I don't know how I would implement X. Well, just look at how the C compiler does it. That's a way to kind of learn pretty quickly something you don't know. Let me see. Would you ever think about using C# or Python? No, I don't like interpreted languages. Also, garbage collection is totally unacceptable for me. I hate garbage collection as well. Yunfan, how do you approach getting an overview of a large code base like Clang or the Linux kernel? I'm the wrong one to ask. I am not good at that kind of code. That's like a Mike Sarton question. You gotta ask Mike Sarton. He's the one who does that stuff. If someone told me you gotta fix a bug in Clang or something, I'd be like, forget it. Like, I don't even want to know. Don't want to know. Don't want to look at it. All right, are we done? And Garlando Bloom, it's not a long stream. It's a normal time, right? Because we started a half hour late. So let's just go until 7. All right, folks. That's about it. That's about it, my friends. I'm going to wind it down. Thanks everyone for joining me for another episode of Handmade Hero. It's been a pleasure coding with you as always. If you would like to follow along at home, you can always pre-order the game here on handmadehero.org, and it comes with a source code. So if you want to follow along at home, it's an easy way to do it, and it's for your fun and enjoyment, your maximum fun and enjoyment. We also have a forum site, which you can go to if you want to ask questions about the series, or you can also take a look at our annotated episode guide, which is done by some of the people who are on the chat. If you're on there, Miblo, for example, is like the point man these days for it. He even has a Patreon page, which I think I finally got him to link to. I was saying forever, you got to put the Patreon page on the episode guide, but it wasn't there. Yeah, now it's there. It needs to be bigger. God, you guys. You got to make... You spend all the time on the episode guide, and the place where people can pay you for it, it's this little tiny, they're never going to see that. You put it over here or right here or something. Patreons. Contribute, help make episode guide possible. Button. Right? But anyway, point being, there's a Patreon page for Miblo. Where he actually accepts donations for all the work he does on the Handmade Hero annotations, which he does a lot of work. Like, if you go look on here, you can see like all this stuff. Like, for example, here's yesterday's. You can see that he puts in all these time markers and stuff, so you can just jump directly to things. You can say like, oh, okay, I want to know exactly where this quote was, or here's where we did this particular thing, or here's where we did this. Here's where push size with deallocation got removed or whatever. So it's pretty great when you're trying to learn from the series. You can jump around and It's just way better than using the raw YouTube. Anyway, so that's about it. If you want to follow the series, obviously, you need to know when it's on. So we also have a tweet bot. You can go, that button right there. It tweets when the series is live, which will be next week. Probably won't have one Friday of next week, so I'm guessing, because is that, oh wait, no. No, it'll be a full week next week, I think. Next week is Thanksgiving, but I probably will still do a stream on Thanksgiving. So I think next week will be a full week. It's the week after that's right before Handmade Con, so we might miss a day somewhere there. But otherwise, should be 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time straight through next week. But if you're unsure about it, check out the tweet bot. It will tell you. That's about it for now. Please enjoy your weekend. Have some good coding. Despite the fact this was intentionally our depression stream, I think, now the depression stream's over, you should at least be able to enjoy your weekend. That's something. I will try to enjoy mine as well. Until Monday, take it easy, everyone, and I'll see you on the internets.